Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma, and we are continuing our study. By the way, we're almost done, okay? I promise. We're going to be concluding our study of the resurrection in 1 Corinthians 15, and obviously, we've looked at the Old Testament background. We've compared 1 Corinthians 15 with Romans chapter 8 specifically, Romans 6 to 8 specifically. We've been involved in a study of the resurrection and the new creation for a good little bit. We will conclude our study of the resurrection by concluding our study of the new creation. As we have shown, the resurrection brings in the new creation. You cannot talk about the new creation without resurrection. They go together. That's all there is to it. There's not even any debate about it. What I've done is I have discussed the new creation from Isaiah 51, Isaiah 64, 65, 66. Now there's a ton of stuff that we left on the table, as it were, from Isaiah chapter 66. But again, not to make this the unending series, I want to show you, since I've already touched on the new heaven and new earth in 2 Peter 3, and shown that Peter was anticipating the new heaven and new earth that would come at the day of the Lord that was foretold by Isaiah. Well, the new heaven and new earth at the day of the Lord foretold by Isaiah was to be a day of the Lord like previous days of the Lord. I developed this extensively in my book, Who is This Babylon? This point alone, folks, destroys, negates, falsifies any possibility that Peter's talking about a yet future day of the Lord to bring in a literal physical new new heaven and new earth. It just doesn't work. Well, what about Revelation? Well, now, that could obviously be a massive study within itself, but I'm only going to make just a few points. We could begin at the very beginning of the book of Revelation and to show, for instance, that chapter 20 is just a recapitulation of the visions in chapter 6, in chapter 12, chapter 14, chapter 18 and 19. But we're not going to delve into that. I simply want to point out that what we have in Revelation is the reiteration of the Old Testament prophecies. We have the reiteration of 2 Peter chapter 3. Now what that means is this. Just as Isaiah 51 through 66 posited the coming of the new creation at the time of the destruction of Old Covenant Jerusalem, Old Covenant Israel, that is exactly and precisely what we find in the book of Revelation. Now, once again, I'm not going to go into this in depth, but look at this particular theme. No one doubts, do they? The new heaven and new earth comes at the passing of the old heaven and the old earth. Revelation chapter 20, 10 to 12. John said, at the great white throne judgment, which is at the end of the millennium, John said, heaven and earth fled away because there was no place found for them. What do we find in chapter 21? John said, I saw a new heaven and a new earth. So at the destruction of creation, whatever that creation is, the new heaven and the new earth came. Well, watch this. In Revelation chapter 16, boy, I tell you, you really have to catch the power of this. In Revelation chapter 16, at the judgment of the city Babylon, all of the islands of the sea fled away. The mountains were shaken and removed. That's the destruction of creation. Now, chapter 16 does not specifically mention the new creation, but it's talking about the passing of the old. Well, if you got the passing of the old, what does that mean for the new? It means the new was going to come. When was that going to be? At the judgment of Babylon. Specifically, at the pouring out of the seventh bowl of God's wrath. The seventh bowl of God's wrath would be poured out on the city Babylon. Who is Babylon? Well, it's the great city where the Lord was crucified. Revelation chapter 11, verse 8. Is there any question whatsoever about where Jesus was crucified? Not really. Not unless we have some kind of a presuppositional idea about who Babylon is, such as Mecca in Saudi Arabia, or New York City, or Rome, or the Roman Catholic Church, none of which is supported by the book of Revelation. So, the old creation would pass at the judgment of Babylon. Babylon was Old Covenant Jerusalem. Therefore, the old creation would pass away at the fall of Jerusalem, which occurred in AD 70. Now, if the old creation passed away in AD 70, that means the new creation came in AD 70. Now, in the next video, I'm going to show you where Revelation chapter 20, Revelation chapter 16, and Revelation chapter 6 confirm this analysis of the passing away of the old creation at the judgment of Babylon, and that focuses on another theme that we will get to. In the meantime, get a copy of my book, Who is This Babylon? All of this information, and a ton more, is in this book. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com, order the book, send me a note that you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping. Now look, we're within 4 or 5 videos at the most of the end of this series on the resurrection of 1 Corinthians 15. I suggested earlier that you send me your suggestions for our next series. I can tell you that at this point, the majority of suggestions have focused on the Olivet Discourse. By far, the majority of suggestions and requests. Now, if you have a request for another topic, maybe something that can be covered in 2 or 3 videos, and yeah, I can do that, believe it or not. Nonetheless, if you have a suggestion for a couple of videos on a shorter subject, send those to me as soon as possible. I'll kind of go through the suggestions, okay? And I'll try to do a couple of shorter series before I begin a series on the Olivet Discourse. Okay, thank you for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. You don't want to miss tomorrow, in which we're going to take a look again at the passing of creation and the coming of the new heaven and new earth. In the meantime, go to my website, donkpreston.com, and do a search for the destruction of creation and the end of the millennium. I've written an article there, posted the first part of it, and you will find it incredibly, incredibly powerful. In the meantime, we'll see you on the flip side.